they need to figure out if Mahomes' ankle really is hurting or not. I mean, as you well know, on Monday kind of came up lame on that particular play, but didn't miss any snaps of scrimmage. So I imagine they could try to find out early just how good this guy's ankle is. I mean, of course, he's going to say this week, and he's been saying he's fine and there's no problems and all that. So wouldn't be surprised if they, put a lot of pressure on him early and see how that ankle is and then go from there.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Broncos and Bourbon. I am your host, Phil Milani. Very excited about this bonus episode of Broncos and Bourbon. The first time that we're doing a bonus episode, and hey, figured that this is a important matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs here at the halfway point of the season. So wanted to bring in someone who knows this team inside and out, someone that we can ask some of the more detailed questions to, and that is Chris Tomasson, who covers the Broncos for the Denver Gazette. Chris is around this team every single day, all throughout the year, so he knows really what the state of mind is for the Broncos. And I thought that would be particularly important after a tough game against the Ravens. You know, the Broncos, they've won 5 out of 6. I think that they've shown that they're a better team than most people expected this season. And then, hey, they ran into a really talented Ravens team. So I'm just curious, was that the real Broncos team we saw last week? Or, hey, was that just not really an indicator of where they are right now? Because they've got another big test coming up against the Kansas City Chiefs. So wanted to ask Chris about those types of things. And I think that you'll enjoy this conversation. And I think that it was a warranting for a bonus coverage here of this game coming up. Chris has covered the Broncos the last couple of years here for the Denver Gazette. Before that, covered the Vikings in Minnesota, covered the NBA for a very long time. People here in the Denver market might have remembered Chris from his time with the Rocky Mountain News. If you're old like me and you're from the Denver area, you certainly remember when this was a 2-newspaper town. So Chris is a veteran reporter, and I used to watch him work in the locker room just to sort of see what he was doing, and he was always that curious guy who's always picking up little stories here and there, and I think that you see that in his reporting, and I asked him about that too in this episode. So I think that you'll really enjoy this. And since this is a bonus episode of Broncos and Bourbon, I thought for the nightcap, maybe I would do like a top 3 bourbons I've reviewed so far. Maybe some of you are starting to think about what's going to be happening for Thanksgiving here. And I thought maybe, hey, if you are interested in picking up a bottle to have after or before, or heck, during your Thanksgiving meal, I will rank the top 3 bourbons that I've reviewed so far. But first, here is my conversation with Chris Tomasson, who covers the Denver Broncos for the Denver Gazette. Chris, thank you so much for taking some time to join the program here. How you been? What's the vibe like around the team this week?
It seems to be, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Phil. Really appreciate it. Seems to be better than one might suspect after a 41-10 thrashing. I think that they know that Baltimore is, obviously a top-notch team, and it just wasn't the Broncos' day. And Sean Payton has been stressing, you got to put this behind you. And I think so far that they have. I mean, I was out at the practice facility when all the players were back there Wednesday, and overall they seem to have forgotten Baltimore, and they're focusing on Kansas City.
Do you think that it was just sort of, a blimp on the radar there last week, or do you think it was more of like a reality check, like, hey, we still have a little ways to go here for this Broncos team?
A little bit of both. I mean, the Broncos came in, the foes that they'd beaten, the 5 foes were a combined 12-29. They haven't beaten a team that currently has a winning record. So it was kind of a measuring stick. I mean, certainly I don't think the Ravens are 31 points better than the Broncos, but this is an up-and-coming Broncos team. I mean, most people didn't think they were going to even be in playoff contention this year, and it takes steps, and I think there's some reality in terms of that.
Yeah, most definitely. Especially when you've got a rookie quarterback back there with Bo Nix. Where would you say that this offense is right now at the halfway point of the season? Are the training wheels completely off and they're letting him operate the entire offense, or are they still trying to be measured with how much they put on Bo's plate?
It's kind of like a game by game thing with Sean Payton. I think he looks at who the foe is and that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, the training wheels are definitely more off than they were early in the season, say Seattle and Pittsburgh, when they weren't allowing Bo to do a tremendous amount. They certainly have a lot more confidence in him. And, they were more aggressive against Baltimore, going for it on all those fourth downs because they felt they had to keep up with the Ravens from a scoring standpoint, and that didn't work. But it's kind of foe to foe. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how things play out against Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City is undefeated, but they're not a scoring juggernaut this season. They seem to be relying more on their defense. I mean, last year's game at Kansas City was 19-8, and at that point, the Broncos were a 1-5 type team. So I wouldn't expect he's going to be maybe throwing it all over the place against the Chiefs. You might have to be more measured, maybe not going for it on fourth down as much.
Yeah, it was interesting last week. After the first couple of drives, you were like, this thing's going back and forth, for a little bit here. But then at the end of the game, you look down and the Broncos only have 10 points. So it did seem like they were being really aggressive at the start, but then it wasn't really leading to points, would you say?
Yeah, that would be the case. I mean, it would have been interesting if some of those fourth down conversions had gone the other way and that sort of thing. And then obviously the defense faltered as well when it kind of needed to. I mean, Baltimore waltzed down the field there late in the first half, and Devin Key misses a tackle, and suddenly it's a touchdown when you're thinking that maybe the best the Ravens are going to do is get a field goal. It's 24-10, and then they get the ball, and Henry just kind of bashes through them. It's 31-10, and that was ball game.
Yeah, both sides of the half there did not go in the Broncos' favor. That's for sure there. Were you surprised, with the trade deadline that came and passed this week that, the Broncos didn't go out and try and give this offense another weapon? Or how much do you read into that where the Broncos are saying, look, we're fine where we are. We're a young team. We're developing. We don't need to go out and make a move to try and do something this year.
Well, I think Sean Payton kind of said it best on Wednesday. He brought up, he did bring some teams, the price tags were too high and they wanted a second round pick, maybe for some guys. He didn't mention who the players were, but they like their core. They realize that this is a stage. They're not going to mortgage their future. They're not just going to start giving away draft picks, because that was a problem with all the picks they gave away for Russell Wilson and then to acquire Sean Payton as well. But the bottom line is they've got a lot of players who are coming off injuries and they need roster spots. I mean, you got Luke Wattenberg, Josh Reynolds, Delarian Turner-Yell, Michael Burton, Drew Sanders, and Quan Alexander is going to come off the practice squad. I mean, you have a number of players that they need to find roster spots on the next couple of weeks. So I don't think exactly they wanted to start acquiring players when they're trying to clear room. And they did with Baron Browning, send him away for a draft pick. And I'm sure there would have been some players that they wouldn't have mind dispatching if they could have gotten draft picks back, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of those names was Courtland Sutton, sort of swirling around there, because to me, when you look at this offense, there's a lot of young guys. It feels like they're high on a few of those young wide receivers. And then you have sort of the outlier is Courtland Sutton, who's obviously been producing for the Broncos the last couple of years here, but he's not one of those young guys that you feel like are up and coming with the rest of this team. I was surprised, you look at the Broncos, you're like, okay, are you going to be buyers or sellers? And with Sutton, his name has been swirling around certainly the last couple of years too. They just seem to always just stay pat with him, huh?
Well, he's got back-to-back 100-yard receiving games now. He's become an excellent leader for those young wide receivers, and they still can control him contract-wise next season. It's not like he has an expiring contract. So, no, I wasn't surprised that they held on to him. I mean, they need someone to help lead this young group of wide receivers rather than just, throwing them all out there on their own.
yeah, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Have one guy in the room that sort of shows them the ropes here on how to be a professional wide receiver. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. Now, you mentioned that they move on from Baron Browning. Does that tell you that they're excited about guys like Ellis who are emerging here for the Broncos at pass rusher? They do the deal with Jonathan Cooper, and then you mentioned that Drew Sanders is back out at practice this week as well.
Yeah, Baron Browning didn't factor into the team's future. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the season, and they decided, obviously, that Jonathan Cooper was the guy they want to move forward with long term. I mean, Nick Benito is also going to be up for a contract, after this season, so he might be a guy that, in a year or so gets an extension as well. You drafted Jonah Ellis. I mean, he's the number 3 outside linebacker at this juncture. Don't forget they've got DeAndre Tillman, who had 2 sacks against Tampa Bay and can't even get on the field. He's been pretty much inactive for the last month. And Drew Sanders is the wild card. I mean, he's coming off a torn Achilles, and they're going to kind of look at him, and they think his best position is outside linebacker, but that's not an absolute certainty. There's still a possibility that they might look at him inside. So really, they didn't lose a lot, I don't think, unless they have injuries down the stretch by trading Baron Browning, because they can get by without him this season. They got by just fine without him when he missed 4 games due to injury earlier this season, and he didn't factor into their future.
Yeah, and the injury concerns, that's always been an issue there with Baron Browning. The defense was one of the top-ranked defenses in the entire NFL heading into that game last week against the Ravens. What did we learn about that side of the ball? Did a few of the areas that they're not the strongest in get a little exposed last week?
Well, they definitely picked on Devin Key. I mean, he had a rugged game in his second game, replacing P.J. Locke, who was out with a thumb injury. I mentioned that missed tackle. He had a face mask penalty, got beaten another time or two. So it looks like Locke's probably going to be back to face the Chiefs, so that'll help their cause. They had been ranked 3rd in the league in both scoring defense and total defense, but I don't think the defense is that good. I mean, they were helped by some of the foes that they had been playing, but this is still definitely a top 10 defense, if not a top 3 defense. I mean, they've been pressuring the quarterback well. We touched upon the depth at outside linebacker. You got a lot of guys there. The defensive line is much improved, and the secondary is better, and it should definitely be better against the Chiefs with Locke back in the fold.
It's going to be a big test going up against Patrick Mahomes, even though the numbers haven't been as gaudy this year with him. And then they add a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. How much are you looking forward to that matchup of Hopkins versus Surtain?
Yeah, that should be interesting. I mean, it's amazing that the case of the rich get richer, landing a player like Hopkins for down the stretch, since obviously a lot of people have been talking last year or two about the Chiefs being weak at wide receiver, but they just keep winning. I mean, they won a second straight Super Bowl last year, and now they're undefeated. So, yeah, that should be a good matchup. And, yeah, I was looking at Mahomes' stats. I mean, it's just amazing. I think 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, but they're just doing what they need to do. I mean, their defense is 4th ranked in terms of points allowed, and they're 10th in points scored. So it's kind of, I was talking to Adam Troutman the other day, and he says that if one side of the ball isn't doing well, the other side of the ball just picks them up. And that's the way it's been all season and why they're undefeated.
Yeah, their defense is playing amazing. Talking more a little bit about Mahomes here, this Broncos defense through the first several weeks here, they've liked to bring a lot of extra pressure and blitz from different areas. But going up against Mahomes, it seems like that's always playing with fire. Do you expect the Broncos to continue that trend there where they're bringing a couple of extra guys, or do you think they try to play Mahomes in a more conservative manner?
Well, we'll see. I think they need to figure out if Mahomes' ankle really is hurting or not. I mean, as you well know, on Monday kind of came up lame on that particular play, but didn't miss any snaps of scrimmage. So I imagine they can try to find out early just how good this guy's ankle is. I mean, of course, he's going to say this week, and he's been saying he's fine and there's no problems and all that. So wouldn't be surprised if they, put a lot of pressure on him early and see how that ankle is and then go from there.
Playing the Chiefs, normally the last several years, we've been talking about that losing streak against Kansas City. The Broncos snapped that streak last year. How much of a deal do you think that is going into it this week? That, look, we're not talking about a long losing streak against the defending, back-to-back Super Bowl champions. Instead, the Broncos maybe gain a little confidence, do you think, from that win last year?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit there, but I think I got the gist of the question. Yeah, I think, well, they're probably, for starters, the happiest that they don't have to answer questions about it anymore because, last year going into Kansas City was all about the losing streak, and then they lost that one, and then the second game of the season in Denver, it was how are you going to stop this losing streak and what have you. So that they're probably enjoying not having to answer those questions. But yeah, that certainly has given them some confidence. I mean, they know that the Chiefs aren't invincible since they beat them fairly convincingly last season in Denver. And I think even that 19-8 loss on Thursday earlier in the season to Kansas City probably gave them some confidence because that was kind of the game where the defense maybe turned around a good bit last season. I mean, they got off to an atrocious start in defense, including the 70-20 loss to Miami. But the defense kind of started to turn around that game, even though it was a loss. And I think that gave them some confidence for later in the season when they eventually ripped off 5 straight wins.
Yeah, for some reason, they'd always played the Chiefs pretty close. And then, down the stretch, they just couldn't find a way to secure the victory. Got over the hump finally last year. Last one here about the Broncos for you, Chris. Last week talking about the Ravens game being sort of a measuring stick, talking about the Broncos wins all coming against teams with a losing record right now. What do you think this week going up against the Chiefs? You think that the Broncos, they feel like, hey, they need to prove something a little bit? Or do you think that, hey, let's just see what happens, and if they put we'll find out more, I guess, about this Broncos team going up against the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think we'll find out more for going down the stretch how good this Broncos team is, but I don't think they necessarily, we got to have one for our resume, because they can get in the playoffs just beating up on some weakling teams. I mean, they're still in the number 7 spot. Even if they lose to the Chiefs, they're 5-5. And, a lot of the teams that were expected to be good this year aren't. The Bengals, the Dolphins, the Jets. I mean, those teams are fighting for their playoff lives. And even if they lose to Kansas City, there's still very winnable games left in the schedule. The Atlanta game the following week, that'll be a tough one. I mean, if they lose to Kansas City and Atlanta and suddenly it's a 3-game losing streak, then maybe you start to worry a little bit. But, they have games against Las Vegas and Cleveland coming up. So they should be able to stay in playoff contention until late in the season, no doubt. And then they'll need some wins to close, obviously.
Yeah, such a week-to-week league here. Like after winning 5 out of 6, the whole city is going crazy about the Broncos and they're starting to make playoff plans and all that. Then all of a sudden you run into a Ravens team and you're saying, not so fast. Let's see if the Broncos can put up a little bit more of a fight against the Chiefs this week. Chris, let me ask you some questions about you here. It's a segment we like to call Phil's Five. Tell me, who was your favorite player growing up?
Wow. I was always a Sonny Jurgensen fan for some reason. Way back in the 70s, I didn't know anything about football. And first I thought Joe Namath played for the Redskins, and then I was a Redskin fan and found out, wait a minute, because I think I misread a photo caption or something. And then, wait a minute, he plays for the Jets. Okay, who's on the Redskins since they're my favorite team? Sonny Jurgensen. Okay, so he was my favorite player. And I was actually talking to Sonny on the phone last year. I was doing a story on related to the 70-20 loss to Miami because he was the quarterback when Washington destroyed the Giants 72-41 in 1966, which remains the highest scoring regular season game for any particular team. So I did talk to Sonny on the phone last year.
That's pretty cool to be able to talk to your favorite player growing up.
Yeah, true. So, no, I'd met him once before. I think I saw him at a Vikings Redskin game. But, yeah, he's like late 80s, but he seems to be doing pretty well. I had a few good quips when I talked to him on the phone last year for an interview.
Okay, and then what about your favorite player to cover, Chris? Who's somebody that you've been around throughout your career that you've got a chance to rub elbows with, that your favorite player to cover?
Well, I'll throw out a guy who previously would have been pretty obscure, but he's probably not now since he's the head coach of Kentucky. That would be Mark Pope, the former journeyman NBA center. I covered him with the Denver Nuggets for the late, great Rocky Mountain News, and he was just a pleasure to talk to. He was always like the last guy on the bench, and they were always stashing him on the injured list with made-up injuries. Knee tendonitis was a favorite one. And he told me a story about how he once asked a team to put him on the injured list with dandruff. But, they didn't go for that.
Yeah, that it would be hard to miss a game that way, I guess. What about your favorite interview? Like, do you have a memorable moment that, you were interviewing a guy that really stands out?
Well, I'll throw out this interview. It's probably a little bit depressing, but Fred Cox, the former longtime Vikings kicker who invented the Nerf football. He actually made more money inventing the Nerf football. I interviewed him in 2019, and sadly, he was in hospice care and knew he was soon going to die. He had heart and kidney stuff. And it was, he talked about how he led a great life and gave a phenomenal interview and had, put it up, and it's still on YouTube. And then 4 days later, he died. And wow. That was kind of just memorable. I used to cover the Vikings. He was their all-time leading scorer. And it was amazing the courage that he had, knowing that he was days away from dying, but knew he'd had a great life with the Vikings, inventing the Nerf football, and he also became a dentist as well. So that interview stands out.
Wow, inventing the Nerf football, that's very cool. I mean, that is introducing the game to, millions of kids every year. So that's a pretty cool legacy. Nerf football, I always think back to, I don't know if you remember that John Elway commercial, where he's up at Folsom Field in Boulder, and he's like throwing the football, like 100 yards with the Nerf football. that always sticks out to me when I think about Nerf football. Okay, next one for you here is what's the part of your job that you enjoy the most?
I think it's just, getting some of those interesting interviews and kind of finding out backstories. I did a story about a month or so ago. I was just kind of browsing around to find out who the oldest living former Broncos quarterback was, and it was a guy named Hunter Enos who played in just a couple games in 1962 and threw 2 passes. And like, who's this guy? Did a little research and found out that he went into the oil and gas business and eventually sold out for $500 million. So the trivia question is, who's the richest former Broncos quarterback? Is it Peyton Manning? No. Is it John Elway? No. Nope. It's Hunter Enos. He's 87 years old, lives in Fort Worth, Texas, and he's worth $500 million or so. So it's gosh. Just kind of finding out those interesting stories that maybe you didn't know about before.
Yeah, you got to have that curiosity, huh? I mean, I feel like just being around you in the locker room and that kind of thing, you are always so curious and just talking to anybody around to find something interesting, huh?
Well, I kind of joke once. I actually said this to somebody. I was at the Las Vegas Summer League, and I'd done all my interviews for the day. And somebody asked me if I was going to work in my hotel room or not. And I said, I'll just go work at this Summer League facility because, at that point, there were some rumors that Kenny Martin had been suspended by the Nuggets a month or 2 earlier, and no one had talked to him, or he'd given no interviews. And I joked with someone, I think I'll go work at the facility because I don't think Kenny Martin's going to walk into my hotel room, but maybe he'll be at the facility. And lo and behold, I go work at the facility, and Kenny Martin walks in. So I got an interview with him there. So
yeah. Oh my gosh, that's luck favors the prepared, right? I think is what they say. So that's awesome. And then the last one for you for the segment here is what's an event that you'd like to cover that you've not had a chance to cover yet in your career?
Well, I've been fortunate in my career. I've been able to cover 5 Olympics and, Super Bowls and Final Fours, and even covered 2 Mr. Olympia bodybuilding competitions where I was the skinniest guy there, including the women. But the one that I'd like to cover would be a World Cup. I had a chance to go to a World Cup game as a fan in 1994. And, I would have had to drive a long while with a friend, but that was kind of dumb. I probably should have not turned that down. So World Cup's coming to America. Maybe I'll try to finagle my way to one of those games, but would like to cover a World Cup game.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure that would be pretty amazing experience there. Okay, and then last one for you here, Chris, to wrap up. What's some career advice that you would give to a young reporter just starting out in this business? What's something that you would encourage them to do?
I would say look for good, unique stories. And, even if it's a high school player or a local recreation player or what have you, I mean, that's the key, is good probing stories. I mean, sometimes you'll get emails from some, young reporter, and they're writing something like about the NFL that they saw off TV or something. I'm like, well, that's not what you need to do. Go find some interesting high school player who's doing something crazy or somebody like that, and get an interesting, deep probing type interview. It doesn't matter if it's at a lower level or whatever. That's what I would say is the key. Just kind of looking for a unique type story, whatever it is.
A good story is a good story. It doesn't matter what level of they are in their athletic journey. If it's a good story, people want to read it, right?
You are correct, Phil.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. I hope that I think it's supposed to be a little bit rainy in Kansas City, but sure beats some of the snow that we've been getting here in Denver, huh?
Yeah. Sean Payton said the other day he's worried about the field because it's supposed to rain heavily on Saturday, and they've got a college game there, Kansas, Iowa State. So, Kansas City is the even though he doesn't work there, it's the former home of George Toma, the turf god there in the NFL for years. So maybe his turf legacy continues there, and even if it rains and the field gets mucked up Saturday, it'll be in good shape Sunday.
They'll have to work some magic, to get that thing turned around. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy going out to Kansas City, maybe get a little barbecue, and always appreciate your insight on the Broncos. So thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Phil.
My thanks to Chris Tomasson for spending some time here on the program. Really enjoyed his insight there. And look, a veteran reporter who's covered a lot of really amazing things, as you heard just there from him. And I think that covering a World Cup game would be really awesome. And it's events like that I find when I talk to veteran reporters. It's stuff like that they are hopeful that they'll be able to cover at some point. Like he's covered an Olympics, but like an Olympics or a World Cup or something that's like every 4 years. Those are on a lot of reporters' bucket lists. So really enjoyed his conversation there. A lot of interesting points about this Broncos team. And, I think that he seemed optimistic about the Broncos regardless of what happens this week. And, if you watch my episode with Brandon Stokely this week, you sort of know where I stand on this game. I think it's going to be really tough to pull off a victory, particularly on the defensive side going up against Patrick Mahomes, DeAndre Hopkins, another week there to really get that chemistry going. I feel like even though the Chiefs are undefeated, they haven't played their best football so far this year. And I'm wondering here, as we enter later November, December, that's when they're really going to start coming together. So, it's crazy to think about the possibility of a three-peat, but this Chiefs team, if they're able to stay healthy, who knows what's possible, especially with how good their defense is playing. So I'm really interested to see how PS2 handles DeAndre Hopkins, and maybe if you could take away him and if you limit Kelsey, maybe the Broncos will be able to stay in this game longer. And if Bo Nix is able to work some magic on the other side, you want this game to be close as you get into the fourth. That's something that you've heard from Sean Payton is, hey, keep the game close, be in it as you enter into crunch time, and then you never know what happens. So I think the Broncos can win this one, but it's going to be a heck of a test, and I'm excited to see how they bounce back from a game like last week against the Ravens. 41-10, certainly not what this Broncos team is about. So how do you bounce back? What kind of fight do they show this week against the Chiefs? All right, let's get into some bourbon review here. Look, it's November. It's snowing here in Denver. Maybe you're starting to think about Thanksgiving if you're living in the States here. And so here's a couple of bottles I think you'll enjoy having on your Thanksgiving bar. The number one bourbon I've tasted so far has got to be this Four Roses. I still have it because I'm trying to save it until Thanksgiving, but it as you can see, it's starting to get lower and lower here. So Four Roses is definitely the best that I've tried so far. Then number two would be the Knob Creek 9. I've ran out of it. I don't know what happened, but it's gone now. So that is number two. And then number three, I think, is a tie. A couple of weeks ago, I did the Russell's Reserve 10. Really have been enjoying this one. So I do like this one. It's 90 proof. I think that this could be good for after Thanksgiving. But in a tie here with Old Granddad 114. All these bottles are so low. I don't know what's going on. This one is high proof. It's 114. So definitely be careful if you're drinking this one. You don't want to be that guy at Thanksgiving who's a little bit out of control. But definitely Old Granddad 114. This is I've been enjoying this one too. So those are like my top 3-4 bourbons that I've reviewed so far. If you have any recommendations that you'd like to see me review coming up here in the next couple of weeks, somebody's told me definitely try Buffalo Trace. I think I'll do that. Maybe I'll try an Elijah Craig. That is one of my favorite bourbons. That's one of my go-tos. So maybe I'll do an official review here of Elijah Craig. And then I know that we've been having some requests to do like a brandy or something like that for a special episode. Maybe we'll do another bonus episode coming up and I can do a brandy or something like that. I think that could be fun. So let me know what you think about doing a bonus episode. I thought maybe it'd be fun to just have a little bit extra coverage this week as we get set to see the Broncos face the Chiefs in a big matchup. So let me know what you think. Please like and subscribe as we really get this community here, the Broncos and Bourbon community, off the ground and get it going. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the show. All right, that's going to do it for us. My thanks to Chris Tomasson for joining the program and providing some really detailed insight on this Broncos team. That is going to do it for this week's bonus episode for Broncos and Bourbon. I'm Phil Milani.